Bonjour à tous et à toutes. It's a great day. Je m'appelle Anne Lagacé-Dawson, journaliste indépendante et directrice des communications de la Coalition canadienne de la santé. Je suis là avec Charlie Angus, député, et John Cartwright du Council of Canadians, ainsi que Jean Teillet, avocate métisse en Colombie-Britannique, et Mark Tewksbury, Olympic athlete and LGBTQ activist, pour vous présenter l'engagement pour le Canada, The Pledge for Canada, une réponse à l'agressivité de la part de Trump envers le Canada. Il y a deux choses qui me motivent ce matin. L'affirmation insultante de Trump que les Canadiens et les Québécois voudront le système médical des États-Unis plutôt que le système médical que nous ayons. Ça, j'ai trouvé ça époustouflant comme arrogance. Le système de santé américain fait en sorte que 60 000 personnes meurent par manque de soins par année. Et la fermeture au Québec de 7 entrepôts d'Amazon par la compagnie de Jeff Bezos, ça nous a laissé complètement bouche bée. Il était question d'un syndicat dans un entrepôt, on a fermé les 7. Et ça, c'est la façon que les oligarques gèrent le monde. Et c'est ça qu'on rejette aujourd'hui. C'est cette façon-là d'aborder les travailleurs et les Canadiens. So this morning, we have an impressive list of signatories of the Pledge for Canada, l'engagement pour le Canada, dont Magali Picard de la Fédération des travailleurs du Québec, Pam Palmatier, well-known Indigenous activist and academic, Grand Chief Stuart Phillip, Danny Williams, Alan Rock, and Mohammed Lachmi of the Toronto Metropolitan University. We have a wide spectrum of signatories right across the political and cultural landscape. And latest breaking news is that we have a host of cool artists and musicians, including Arcade Fire, who signed on this morning, and a bunch of other cool musicians, including Charlie Angus, who I'm going to invite to take the podium.
Thank you.
Charlie.
Good morning, Wache. Bonjour. Proud to be here on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation and Algonquin people. Le Canada fait face à une menace existentielle pour notre démocratie et notre nation. Ce matin, nous représentons une coalition de dirigeants politiques et syndicaux, les artistes culturels, les militants autochtones. Nous présentons l'engagement du Canada. Il s'agit d'une déclaration pour défendre nos institutions, notre souveraineté et nos valeurs contre la menace de Donald Trump. Cette déclaration est la première étape pour rallier les Canadiens, pour développer un mouvement de résistance partout au Canada, pour défendre notre pays et notre valeur. We are here this morning, my friends, as an unlikely group with leaders from across the political spectrum who've come together with cultural leaders, artists, academics, athletes, labor activists, and Indigenous militant activists. We represent the incredible regions of our beautiful country, and we are here for one reason. Our nation, our beloved Canada, is under threat. It is an economic threat, but it's also a threat to our values of decency and inclusion. It's a threat to our sovereignty and our very future as a nation. The threat comes, of course, from the President of the United States, a convicted felon and known predator. He's threatening massive tariffs to try and break us as a people. But the threat is also being driven by the hate algorithms of the oligarchs like Elon Musk. And there is the threat from people in our own country who would sell out our birthright to appease the gangster class from Mar-a-Lago. That is not going to happen. This morning, we launched the Pledge for Canada. We have signatories from across the cultural and political spectrum. We are asking Canadians to join and sign on today. It's a plan of resistance supporting a vision of our nation and what it should be and what it is that will not be traded away by appeasement. And it's a pledge for ordinary Canadians to hold their elected representatives to account, to defend our values that we hold dear. I've been honored to be part of this team. It started out as a small group, reaching out to other Canadian voices to try and find a way to come together in this age of Trump. And what we learned very quickly is that Canadians are proud and fiercely determined. We love our country and we will stand up for it. And what we are calling for today is an all-of-Canada approach in dealing with Trump. It's about fighting to protect all of our regions and our jobs, our linguistic, cultural, and Indigenous rights. We will not give up our belief in inclusive democracy, equity, and human rights. We need to combat the foreign interference from both the public and private actors and the manipulations of the digital platforms, and defend our people against the rule of the oligarchs. We must give priority at this time to protecting our environment, to maintain control of our water, and staying focused on fighting the climate crisis. And it's becoming very clear that to build resiliency for Canada in this increasingly turbulent world, it means actually lessening our dependency on our southern neighbor.
Hear, hear.
To strengthen our collective tools and institutions to build the Canada that we want, not the world that Trump is trying to create. And that means reaching out to democratic allies around the world who are determined to protect democracy from the likes of Trump and Putin. And we cannot turn away our historic role of being a humanitarian friend for those suffering in this world. Our borders must continue to welcome and protect those seeking and deserving shelter in our lands. Okay, so what does a pledge mean? Well, today is the beginning of a grassroots resistance. We're asking people from across Canada to sign their names, to join us so we can start to build this movement. This is going to be the first stage of a much broader-based resistance to defend the values of our beloved country and to respect the sacrifices of Canadians who came before us and gave their all so that other nations might live in peace. We will not squander their legacy. We are Canada. And our message to Donald Trump is we will not bend or break no matter what happens. We pledge to be there for Canada. I turn it over to John Cartwright now. Thank you.
Bonjour tout le monde. Good day. My name is John Cartwright. I'm a carpenter by trade. I started my trade at the age of 18. And today I'm the chairperson of the Council of Canadians. And when we say that word Canadians, I think of my family that came here from elsewhere looking for a better life, as millions and millions of us have, whether as immigrants or refugees. Our Council of Canadians was formed 40 years ago. People like Mel Hurtig and Maud Barlow warned that a free trade agreement that was so unfair would have tremendous impact on our country. And in fact, we saw what happened. Hundreds of thousands of jobs were decimated within the first few years. Our society changed dramatically, and it locked us into a dependency of trade patterns that made us far more vulnerable to the threats that Donald Trump is making today. His actions are going to hurt people. His actions are going to hurt our communities. Doesn't matter which place or what kind of community people belong to, there will be impacts. And in fact, it is a reminder of a modern-day economic gunboat diplomacy. Canada is not perfect. You know, since the first peoples came here, generations of immigrants and refugees have sought refuge, as Charlie has said. But we know it's a work in progress, and we know it's worth the fight. Some say that we should accommodate Mr. Trump and align our policies and our programs with him.
No.
And we reject that bad advice. We want to defend the sovereignty of this country, the rights of Indigenous peoples, our healthcare system, our environmental standards, and the social safety net that is so important, that helped us get through COVID, that helps us get through the time of crises, including the mental health crises that so many of our neighbors have gone through in this last period of time. I don't want to see a picture of another family that drowns or freezes to death trying to reach this country because of what Donald Trump is imposing on the people of America. We want to have a safety net for all workers who are going to be impacted. We want a strategy to diversify our trade and to build a different kind of emergency plan for those who not are only losing their jobs, but those young people whose prospects will be changed. We want to see the skills of people building permanently affordable housing, creating a care economy that cares for us at all points of our life and enriches the communities we live in. Canadians want to step up and fight. And we know that it's not just about us as Canadians. We know the actions of Mr. Trump will be impacting on people across the world. And so even though our name is the Council of Canadians, we believe it's so important to reach across borders and to stand in solidarity with all of humankind. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Of the Council of Canadians, we're going to ask Jean Teillet to address us from Victoria, BC on Zoom.
Good morning, everybody from Vancouver. My name is Jean Teillet, and I am the great-grandniece of Louis Riel and a very proud Métis Canadian. And my thoughts go back to 1871, when the Métis in Manitoba were fighting against what was called a reign of terror that Canada was inflicting on them. But when the Fenians started to try to invade Canada, Louis Riel stood up and he said, we have to put aside our own problems right now and fight for Canada, because we joined Canada and we will take up arms to defend Canada. Generations later, my father and my uncles fought in World War II to stand up against the tyranny of Germany. And today, that's what I call what I see coming from the United States. It's tyranny. And that's what I think, that's why I signed this pledge, because I think we have to stand together to fight against tyranny. And I take my example from when Riel put down petty or smaller differences, no matter how big they were, to fight against the larger problem, which was the tyranny coming. Ironically, it was coming from the United States, and here we are again, fighting tyranny from the United States. I think we have to stand together to fight them. And I know it's currently gripping, this tyranny is gripping our neighbor, but I think that we have to stand on guard against it, whether it comes in the guise of Americans or whatever guise it comes on. We have to mobilize, we have to be vigilant, and we have to guard against this, because this is what is going to undermine and eliminate the rights and dignity of the Indigenous peoples of this country. And we have been on a journey for a long time to fight for the rights of Indigenous people, and we've made tremendous strides. We're not there yet, but we have made tremendous strides particularly in the last decade, to change where we were before, and we need to continue on that. We cannot let this threat from our American friends to override what we've been doing. These are unjust ideas that are coming forward, and they attack the dignity of all Canadians. And I think that I stand together with all the people who stood on this pledge, because we will not move the rights of Indigenous people forward if we bow to the tyranny coming from the United States. It is only by standing together with Canadians. So I'm urging everyone to sign on to this pledge and then to take action to stand up against this threat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jean Teillet, la petite fille de Louis Riel, qui s'est jointe à nous. Merci beaucoup. And now we're going to ask Mark Tewksbury, Olympic gold medal winner and LGBTQ activist, to speak.
Thank you very much, Jean. That was beautiful. It was great to hear your comments. Thank you for the invitation to be here. Good morning, bonjour tout le monde from Calgary. Listen, I've always believed in speaking up. I was inspired as a young man by June Collwood, journalist and activist, who said, when you see an injustice, you're no longer a bystander, you're a witness, you're a part. So do your part. And that's what I'm doing today by signing this pledge. I'm a proud Canadian. I've represented Canada internationally many times. I'm a companion of the Order of Canada. And I just feel now it's time to double down on Canada, to recognize our own strengths and to take action together. Because what happens if we don't? I've seen coming together as a national swimming team and going to the Olympics to represent Canada. And on paper, we had potential to win 7 or 8 medals. But by the last day of competition, we had won none. Because instead of coming together, we fought against each other. The clubs from Toronto and Montreal competed against Calgary and Vancouver. And so the world didn't have to beat us. We beat ourselves. We completely imploded. But when we put that kind of thinking aside on the last day of competition and rallied around a common goal, we shocked the world, even ourselves. We won a silver medal. And it shows the power of what can happen when we unite. I fast forward to Vancouver 2010. I think no matter where you were in the country, you felt a sense of pride from how we hosted those games, from how Team Canada performed at those games. When the athletes left the Vancouver 2010 experience, all the team said the top two reasons for why they were so successful, because they were part of one unified Canadian team. There is such power in that. When I was chef de mission in London 2012, the next Olympics, it was my job to keep that tradition going, to make sure that we united as one team to show up the best we could to face the world. For me, this pledge is also about continuing a tradition of uniting around Canadian values, decency, inclusion, upholding human rights, respecting each other. And it's about moving forward collectively on our terms. As Jean urged you to sign this pledge, so do I. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mark, for those inspiring words. We know that we have very, very tough days ahead, and we are going into a time of darkness, and the world is facing a time of darkness. But we are very confident that Canadians have the spirit. Canadians have the love of their land and the love of their neighbor to stand tall. So we are calling on people to be warriors for Canada at this time, to defend our values, and to not give in to the appeasement of Donald Trump and his oligarchs. We're here for you, Canada. This is the Pledge for Canada. We will take any questions that people have right now. Thank you very much. Yes, the website?
Website is engagement.
Engagement
Pour le Canada.
pour le Canada. Here,
Pledge
you
for
give it to
Canada. So there's a live website that you can go to sign in either English or French, which lays out the terms of the pledge. And you just search for Pledge for Canada, Engagement pour le Canada. Si vous regardez vous faites une fouille sur Internet, vous allez le trouver. C'est live actuellement. Vous pouvez signer. Il y a une version anglaise et une version française. L'Engagement pour le Canada, Pledge for Canada. And we urge everybody to start by signing, and then the movement takes shape. On va passer à l'action sous peu. Merci à tous et à toutes.
Engagement-canada-pledge.ca. Please go to it. Please sign up. We'll take if there's any questions.
Sarah with the Canadian Press. I wonder, Charlie, what you make of the fact that you talked about us reaching out to our democratic allies around the world. What do you make of the fact that Canada's allies really aren't saying a whole lot about Donald Trump threatening these tariffs, threatening to make Canada the 51st state?
Well, we see certainly that Donald Trump is threatening our European allies. He's threatening Denmark and Greenland, and we know that the EU is very focused on that threat right now, because it's not just a threat against the people of Greenland, it's a threat against NATO. This is Donald Trump undermining our allies at a time of dangerous aggression from Putin. But we certainly, as we stand up and these issues start to come forward, we expect to see support from our European allies. We see that Elon Musk has interfered in Germany. We see Donald Trump is threatening regime change in the UK. This is highly dangerous, highly irresponsible. We do need to work across all party lines. And we have to work across all international lines to defend democracy.
You've talked about putting tariffs on things like Teslas. Do you think...
Did I say that? I said 200%. Did I say 200% tariffs?
Yeah, I think you did say 200%.
The douche panzer?
I mean, sanctioning or taking action against the kind of billionaire class that's surrounded Trump right now, is that something that you think would risk retaliation?
Right now, we're facing major threat. But the issue of what we would do, I leave that to our elected officials, because I don't believe that you negotiate in public. Personally, I would throw as much heat on Elon Musk as possible, because he's a deplorable, disgraceful human being. But that's my own personal opinion. But the Pledge for Canada is about rallying Canadians so that we keep the pressure on our elected leaders not to trade away our values in these negotiations, not to trade away fundamental principles that we stand for as Canadians. So I'll leave it to the government in terms of the retaliatory steps that will be taken when the tariffs come in.
Concerns about the risk of American interference in the upcoming election and the leadership race and just generally in Canada's affairs right now?
I have written to Elections Canada. I do not believe we're prepared in any way for dealing particularly with the threat that's coming from Elon Musk, who's revealed himself to be dangerously anti-democratic, and he has one of the most powerful one of the powerful media platforms on the planet right now, and he's shown a willingness to interfere in the UK. He's shown a willingness to intervene in the EU. We see that the EU is demanding access to the algorithm to see if he is trying to push content for extremist groups. I'm asking Elections Canada to do the same thing. We have to protect our election right now. Justice Hogue has begged us to implement her recommendations, and I think her recommendations are only part of the broader threat that we're faced right now.
I'd like to also respond to that question. The Council of Canadians, our slogan is People, Planet, and Democracy. And through this pledge, we're calling on Canadians from all walks of life to organize, to move into action in their own communities across their whole sectors. In the signatories, you'll see leaders from the labor movement, from the student movement, from various community organizations all across this country. And every organization has a constituency that can be involved to build the power that's necessary to protect our democracy, to protect our economy, to protect our society. And so while it's a group of signatories, underneath those signatories is the power of millions and millions of Canadians. And we know from our struggle in the anti-globalization movement 25 years ago that the voices of people in many languages, in many spaces, becomes powerful and can actually change the course of history. We know from Canada, when water was being privatized everywhere across the world, Labour, Council of Canadians, environmentalists came together. We stopped the privatization of water in city after city after city. Meanwhile, in the UK, Thames Water, which was the poster child of privatization, is almost on the verge of bankruptcy, and one of our major pension funds has walked away from $1 billion worth of assets. So we understand the dynamics of people standing up for democracy, for their communities, and for the common good.
Moi, je vais ajouter quelque chose. Au Québec, on a un appel de boycott d'Amazon qui semble prendre de la force. So boycotting is one small step that people can take. I know spontaneously people are calling for boycotts of American products. Don't buy American products when there's a very reasonable Canadian product. On peut commencer comme ça, tout en coupant son abonnement à Amazon, parce qu'on sait que ça va faire en sorte que 3000 personnes au Québec vont perdre leur job, alors que la situation économique est très difficile pour les gens. So that's one thing people can do. I've even heard people talking about dumping beer in the Halifax harbor, U.S. beer, which is terrible anyway.
We're not going to pollute the harbor.
There are lots of things we can do. So we're asking for people to be creative, utiliser leur créativité. We know Canadians are very creative, they're very funny, they're very nice, except when they're pushed around.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit more about that than the call to action for people here. Aside from sort of signing a pledge, what do you want to see people do? Are you asking people to go, like, be out in the streets protesting?
We're seeing already across Canada groups, individuals, people taking action. The idea of the Pledge for Canada was to bring people together with a set of values so that we focus. And that's what the Pledge is focused on, to have people from, I mean, I never thought I'd be signing a document with Danny Williams and Alan Rock, but hey, we're all Canadian and we all share those same values. And what we're saying is it doesn't really matter where we are on the spectrum of politics and culture. Canada comes first. Once we have started to build this movement, then now we have a network to start coming together with ideas. We're getting lots of creative ideas. I don't think it would be advisable for us now to sort of say the next step and what we're going to do. We're building the pledge, we're building the base of support, and we want to use it in a way that keeps pressure on our elected officials and our business leaders not to sell us down the river to the likes of Donald Trump.
Just another question for you here. There's a political scientist, Emmett McFarlane, who said it's time to sanction some American billionaires who are close to Trump. Do you agree with that?
Well, again, as my colleague said, we saw what Jeff Bezos did in Quebec to thousands of Quebec jobs for people daring to unionize. Well, to hell with Jeff Bezos. The right of Canadians to make their own decisions about employment is important. We see Elon Musk is a major threat to democracy. Whether or not we move on those steps right now, I'm going to defer to the government, who will have to respond to Mr. Trump tomorrow. But I think the pressure to hold these characters accountable in the way we held other oligarchs, particularly Putin's oligarchs, to account, Canada's going to have to defend itself. This is going to be a tough time. We're going to have to make tough decisions, but we have to be strong.
Finally, for me here, Canada and the Western world have long been able to rely on the United States as a partner, an ally, a leader in the world. Do you think we are too slow to react to what seems like an unprecedented shift from the Americans right now?
I think Canadians just assumed everything would be okay because they're our cousins. We know Americans. We live along the border. But what happened on November 5th was a dangerous shift, an anti-democratic shift, a threat that we see being played out with them going into schools to try and deport children, the suspension of basic democratic rule of law. Canada is susceptible to that. What I'm feeling, and I think what we feel, is that Canadians are out way further ahead than our politicians. Canadians get the threat. Canadians get the need to defend who we are. What's concerning is whether or not our leaders have our backs the way we Canadians expect. And this is part of why the pledge is here, is to push for this vision, to say these are our values and we're not trading them away. But we are going to have to step up very quickly.
I'm going to just jump in on that. And I think the call is for people to take their creativity and ensure that that's impacted in the political decisions that are made. I'm a cancer survivor. The stuff that I was given to work with for the first 10 years brought about the lymphoma that's running through my blood. But health and safety activists like me were able to dramatically change laws, dramatically able to change how products are created, and a mass movement that changed laws all across this country. We saw in Quebec the students with the Carouge standing up for the right to accessible education. We saw people demanding environmental and pollution laws so that lakes you could swim in again, rather than being afraid you're going to get sick. We saw workers demanding the right to have public health care. There's a plaque in Windsor, Ontario, by the auto workers that said, "We won the first industrial health plan of all workers in the 1950s. We will not rest till all Canadians have health care." We have examples from across this country, from Idle No More to people like Art Manuel and others, our ancestors who organized Punjabi farm workers in British Columbia. Our ancestors organized fisher folks to have a collective voice. Canadians have a lot of creativity. We understand how we can build power to demand a just world based on racial, economic, and climate justice. And that's what the call is, to step up, to use creativity, and to build the power to say we demand a better world, not one defined by Donald Trump.
And I'll just say one closing thought. I remember the days when we fought the free trade agreement and talked about Canada as a branch plant of the United States. And the agreement took place and was imposed on workers. And John alluded to the number of people who lost their jobs. People like my father, who was a unionized auto worker, who would have lost his job. So we're not just calling on the people of Canada. We're trying to put pressure on the leadership, political and economic, to develop a spine and push back against this. We know the Canadian ruling class has tended to be pretty compliant, but now even they are a bit nervous. We've seen Stephen Harper, Jean Chrétien. I bet a lot of people in the C-suite are thinking, whoa, what's going on now? So we need those people to start paying attention, serious, close attention, to what we're saying and what the threat is, because it's very real. We've had tariff wars with the U.S. before. This one is probably the most extreme. So that's the purpose, I think, also in the long term. Now, that's very grandiose. We'll see how it goes. But c'est ça l'idée, c'est de faire pression sur les oligarques canadiens, entre autres, nos patrons, les notables de développer un peu de cran et de guts pour faire face à la menace.
Thank you.
Voilà.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Merci aux collègues de la Galerie de la Presse.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Merci.
Yes.
And we particularly want to thank Mark and Jean for
Yes,
coming
thank
online
you,
with
thank
us.
you, Mark
Yeah,
and Jean.
thank you
Yes.
to Mark and Jean,
Yes,
and to Jan and Charlie's
Thank
office.
you.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.